All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Victoria Law. Victoria is the editor of the zine Tenacious, Art and Writings from Women in Prison. She is the co-founder of Books Through Bars, as well as the author of Resistance Behind Bars, The Struggles of Incarcerated Women, which you can find at resistancebehindbars.org. Victoria, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this.
All right, so Victoria, at least over 1,000 prisoners, it looks like, are currently on hunger strike at the Pelican Bay State Prison in California. There's more that are showing their solidarity all across the state. This is, however, not the first hunger strike at Pelican Bay. Tell us about the history of the hunger strikes at the prison.
So in 2011, people in Pelican Bay security housing units called for a mass hunger strike that began on July 1st, 2011. They were protesting the indefinite use of solitary confinement for people who were validated or labeled as gang members, often without the ability to defend themselves, often using circumstantial evidence, such as having greeting cards or having certain political material, such as having, say, material about the Black Panther Party or African American history, or simply for being jailhouse lawyers, meaning that they were people who filed complaints and helped other people with their legal work. And once validated as a gang member, the only way out of these security housing units is to debrief or inform on other gang members. Now, here's the catch-22. If you don't know anything about gang members because you are not a gang member, then there is no information that you can give to get out of these SHU units. If you are a gang member and you debrief, then you put yourself and your family members at risk for retaliation. So there are more than 500 people who have spent more than 10 years in these units. Keep in mind that they're in 7 by 11 foot cells with no windows. There's a perforated steel door that faces a concrete wall. They're locked in there 22 hours a day. When they are taken out to exercise, it's often to another indoor area. Many of them have never seen sunlight or gotten fresh air in the time that they've been there. 200 people have spent over 15 years under these conditions, and 78 people have spent over 20 years locked into these cells. So the first strike happened in 2011, and at that point, more than 12,000 people participated at its height. It rapidly spread to other prisons, not only to people in solitary confinement units, but also in the general population. The California Department of Corrections agreed to review their demands, one of which was an end to this indefinite solitary confinement and to use solitary confinement as a last resort rather than the way that it's currently being practiced. And then when no changes were forthcoming, they went on strike again for 3 weeks in late September, early October, until the Department of Corrections agreed to negotiations and to a comprehensive review of every single person in these security housing units.
That was last year when that happened, and they went on strike for 3 weeks in 2012, and then now we are now in July of 2013, and they're on strike again because what the state of California agreed to in the negotiations has not actually occurred, correct?
Yes. Well, they actually had both strikes in 2011. So what they're saying is in these 2 years, they've seen very little changes happening. Mm-hmm. So the California Department of Corrections unveils what they call the step-down program for people who are in the security housing units in the fall of 2012. But under these step-down programs, it could actually send more people to SHUs because they're no longer validated as gang members, but they have what they're now calling the security threat groups, in which basically any 3 or more people that are considered a threat to the safety and security of the institution can be considered a security threat group. And this explodes the number of people who can be sent to solitary confinement. So whereas before there were only 7 acknowledged prison gangs, now there are 1,500 quote-unquote security threat groups that one can be labeled a part of and sent to the SHUs, again, for indefinite solitary confinement.
Unbelievable. I'm talking again to Victoria Law, Resistance Behind Bars, truthout.org. You can find the articles. You can find the articles at Truthout. Let's talk a little bit about. I mean, you mentioned it a little, but the process of prisoners being placed in solitary, because it is the actual way they do it is pretty ridiculous. You mentioned it can be books that they have. They might have a greeting card. They have a book about the Black Panthers, and that's enough to have a prisoner tossed in solitary. Talk a little bit more about that, and kind of and lead and just kind of because again, solitary, it is actual torture. These conditions that these prisoners are being put in. If you look at it in any straight way, this is torturous conditions, and the only way they let them out is through a debrief. So go a little more into detail on that.
So basically what the Department of Corrections and the Prison Administration is doing is it's using these pieces of circumstantial evidence or confidential informants naming someone else in order to get out of the shoe to put people into solitary confinement units. And again, there is no way to refute these charges. So if someone in the shoe then points to, say, Johnny Martinez and says, well, Johnny Martinez is in a gang because that person has had enough and needs to get out of the shoe, Johnny Martinez does not have the ability then to refute these charges because he's basically been validated as a gang member. If Johnny Martinez has a political book in his cell, or has signed a greeting card to somebody else, or has perhaps signed a group petition advocating for better conditions within the prison system, that can also be used as evidence of gang activity by the prison when they're putting people in these shoe units.